Hi, this is Joe Bonamassa, and you're listening to my weekly mixtape with your host, Brian Cole.
Welcome to My Weekly Mixtape, a podcast that takes the classic mixtape approach to building a modern playlist. I'm your host, Brian Colburn. Back in 2003, at a CD listening station at my local record shop, I discovered this evening's guest and was instantly hooked. A few weeks later, I took a group of friends and my now wife to the Mexicali Blues Cafe in Teaneck, New Jersey, to catch this gentleman's power trio live, promising my friends and family an evening of blues music they would never forget. And I'm happy to say that promise was beyond fulfilled. Now here we are, 20 plus years and 27 number one albums on the Billboard Blues chart later. It's my absolute honor to welcome modern blues legend Joe Bonamassa to My Weekly Mixtape. Joe, thank you so much for joining me, man.
Well, interesting about Mexicali Blues, it was a blues club. They did jam bands. They served Mexican food, and it was run by a Jewish guy who loved the blues. And
yes,
Eli. And if that doesn't tell you that music is multicultural and is the universal language, and I don't know what else to tell you. That place had everybody represented, and those are fond memories of those gigs there in Teaneck, just over the bridge. And we're not too far from there right now. Actually, we're in Port Chester, New York tonight.
The legendary Capitol Theater.
2 nights here, and then we have 5 more to go after that. So we're almost done. Not done yet, but almost.
Well, I'd like to start by asking you the question I ask all of my first-time guests, and that is, what does the word mixtape mean to you?
Theft in the 80s, because we used to copy. One kid would have a cassette, and then it was the dual tape deck, and you could copy one song into the next. And you were basically getting the music for free. It was a very analog Spotify. And, it really is the definition of compilations. It's maybe you don't want to listen to a whole album. Maybe you want to listen to 25 of your favorite songs all in a row. Now you have the opportunity. You could your playlist could be endless, literally infinite. But I think on a cassette, you had, maybe 20 minutes aside, 30 minutes aside. And, and that's how we did it. And you trade them, and you'd be like, hey, I got some, I got a Stevie Ray Vaughan live track and some Robert Cray and some whatever, and that's how you discovered music, and that's how you consumed music back then,
Well, it's no secret that you're a guitar connoisseur of sorts. And while some people might call it a collection, I'm going to refer to it as an army of guitars, which at this moment sits at over 500, if I'm correct.
Well, it's definitely a collection. I think the amount of guitars is surpassed 650 by number.
Wow.
But the thing about collecting is I always tell people, you collect what you like. You never want to don't let anybody else spend your money. So if you like a certain type of guitar, if you like those kind of esoteric weird guitars from Taisco, Japanese guitars from the 70s, and if you're surrounded by that kind of stuff and you really love it, then there's nothing wrong with it. Never let anybody tell you, like, well, you really you need one of these, if you don't have any interest in it. My interests are, I like Fender and Gibson solid body guitars from the years probably 1950 to about 1965. And that makes up those 15 years of both Gibson and Fender make up the majority of my collection.
So then my follow-up to that is, when you're in the studio recording, how do you decide, you know what, I want to go with this sound for this guitar? Do you record several tracks using different guitars to try to find the right tone?
Certain songs are just obvious. You know what I mean? You need a Strat for this, or if I'm producing a record with Josh, he'll be the Telly guy, I'll be the Gibson guy, and we'll play rhythm on those tracks. And it just, the majority of my collection is museum grade, meaning that it's completely unmodified, completely in mint condition, with no changes whatsoever. Some guitars even have the original strings. Now, those guitars don't need to be disturbed and beat up for anything. And, but I have stuff that I do play, the stuff that's on the road and it's on, I play that. And then there's also the stuff that, isn't in mint condition that you just grab it and you're like, this is going to be killer. And it sounds great. But it plays well, and it's got frets and it's, so you have to, if you're just a collector of things, then you want to buy the cleanest, most original example of whatever you're collecting, because that will always hold a value. If you're a player, you don't want to drive a race car with bald tires. So yeah, I have to toe the line. I can't just go, I'm a collector and whatever, and never play any of it. So I have to have some of it that is modded or not modded, but just, maintained, meaning that there's new frets on it and, everything works.
Well, back on episode 60, I was fortunate enough to talk with a friend of yours, Walter Trout.
Nice.
And we talked about your collaboration, Clouds on the Horizon, for his Full Circle album. And during our sit down, Walter and I talked about something that I've always been blown away by, and that's the technique of volume swells. And it's actually what drew me to purchase the copy of Blues Deluxe 21 years ago, was your use of volume swells in the title track. I'd love to know your mindset behind volume swells in songs, because I feel like it's something that impacts the song so much.
Well, I mean, it takes the guitar out of the guitar world, meaning that it sounds more like a cello or a violin. And, I learned from watching people like Walter Trout, who's wonderful at it with a Strat. He has a really cool technique where it's really fast and it almost sounds like tremolo. And then there's people like Danny Gatton and Roy Buchanan. And those are the, so when I do the volume swells, it's generally on a cello. And you can channel that, but it just puts it in a different realm. It just brings you into a place where people lean into it. There's parts of the show you want people to lean into. Then there's parts of the show you want to pin them in the back of the seat. And it's a very dynamic way of delivering a solo. And I've used it my whole life. And again, I learned by watching Walter, and Danny was a mentor of mine. And I never met Roy Buchanan, but I certainly heard, Livestock in Town Hall in New York. And, that version of Roy's Blues is haunting. And it's all because of that volume swell, and it's like, something dark. There's some dark demons in that man, when you hear that, what I mean? Like that's he's not projecting, he's not acting. He is those are he's summoning the demon.
Well, I am, and it is no shock to anyone that listens to this show on the regular, a huge fan of cover songs and reinterpretations. And something that has impressed me over the years throughout your career is your choosing of cover songs that you're going to take and put your own stamp on. And two of my personal Mount Rushmore covers are both your version of Sloe Gin, which was originally recorded by actor and singer Tim Curry, as well as Prisoner, which was originally recorded by Barbara Stresiand. What makes you say to yourself, that's a song that's a great cover to add to my arsenal?
Sloe Gin was Kevin Shirley, my producer. And Prisoner was also Kevin's idea. But Sloe Gin was a hit in South Africa. And he heard it in South Africa, and it was written by Bob Ezrin, legendary producer, and Michael Cain. And I know Bob, and I said, Bob, when were you aware that I had cut Sloe Gin? He goes, when the royalty check started coming. I was like, well, fair enough. And I was like, okay. He goes, like somebody cut Sloe Gin, and it's a great desperate blues. Same thing with Prison. It really inherently is. It's a desperate somebody, singing their ass off, trying to, get themselves out of emoting, but yeah, I mean, the thing is, all of us are interpreters. There's not many people that you can really especially modern ones that have never done a cover, have never, recorded anything other than their own music, and never co-wrote with anyone. So it's we're all interpreters in some way, but it's not I mean, look at the jam band circuit. I mean, the bands will learn the entirety of the Beatles' White Album,
Yep.
and and then play it at a night, and then the next night they're doing something else, and it's like you're taking your fans on a journey that is worth it, and if that's knowing how to read your fan base for sure.
And that's something that you do a lot in your live shows, because I own probably more Joe Bonamassa live albums than I do any other artist. And that's because every single time you release a live album, it's a completely different experience. Going back to when you used the Royal Albert Hall, where you used the Doobie Brothers dual drummers approach. You had the 4-night tour de force, where each night you did a different venue in London. You've done acoustic evenings. And then the two songs we mentioned, Sloe Gin and Prisoner, are on your latest release, which is live at the Hollywood Bowl with an orchestra. Are there other live avenues that you feel like you want to tackle in your career? Because I feel like each time you put out a live album, it's truly a unique and different experience for the fans.
Well, we're running out of ideas, to be honest with you. It's at the Hollywood Bowl. And there's only so many live adventures. I mean, we will revisit the orchestra at some point. I want to do a ancient Greek amphitheater one day, like a theme show. We have this thing coming up next year that we're doing in Ireland that's yet to be announced, which will be really exciting. And maybe that's it. There's not many. I don't have many years left in this thing. Like maybe a decade before I just retire. I've done this 36 years. We're taking this thing up to maybe a 45-year career, and that's great enough. Let me go enjoy my life and not work every single day. Everybody goes, "Oh, you're still a young man. You can go for another 35, 40 years." That's not me. That is not going to happen. There's only so many pitches in this arm, and use them wisely from here on out.
Well, digging just a little bit deeper into the orchestra album, watching that Blu-ray and seeing that show unfold, that truly brought a unique level of dynamics to the songs that, while it's there on the studio album, is even more amplified in that setting. What was that like, rehearsing and getting the orchestra ready for that show, for that performance?
It was union-rific. We rehearsed the day before. We had the charts. We had been doing shows with Jeff Bova and his Bova Orchestra, as he calls it, a keyboard, and he's got all these crazy sounds in there, and he orchestrated a bunch of the Hollywood Bowl, and he was nice enough to come tour with us. Jeff doesn't tour. He just doesn't tour. I go, how do you get Jeff Bova to come on? He asked him. And we've been working together almost 20 years. So we had the grid, and then just putting the orchestra, and then it was the challenge of getting the volume right for the orchestra. It's very difficult. They don't like loud guitar. And I'm kind of a loud guitar band. So I think we definitely came to a good compromise. And you hear it on the film. I mean, it's wonderfully mixed by Kevin, and it was just a major project. It was over a year ago we did this. And so, yeah, that was a big show.
Now, I actually have to bring up back in the 90s when Metallica did the first S&M tour with an orchestra. I went to the Madison Square Garden show, and the one thing I remember was the challenge you talked about, because during the first set, nobody heard the orchestra because the band was so loud. And then during the second set, they had figured it out. You guys had one crack at this, and you guys really nailed it.
We nailed it. And these DVD things, there's always something that's going to go wrong on the night that never has happened before in 35 years of touring, especially when you have all the money on the line. And luckily, we did a thing with the orchestra where I opened for myself at the Hollywood Bowl. The Hollywood Bowl required us to have an opening act. And I said, well, we don't usually have an opening act, and we have a lot of lines out, and it's critical all these get recorded, and we didn't really want to move anything, especially at that gig. So I said, you know what, narcissism 101, who better to do it? So we opened for ourselves. So we went out there, did 45 minutes of just like straight 7-piece, and then took a half-hour break, and then came out and played 90 minutes with the orchestra and called it a day.
Unbelievable. Well, your latest studio album is the companion to Blues Deluxe, entitled Blues Deluxe Volume 2. It's now a year old.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to ask, as somebody who's constantly putting out new material, are you in the studio right now working on the follow-up to Blues Deluxe
No.
Volume 2?
I mean, we have tracks recorded, but I don't know when it's going to come out. I don't know when it's going to be finished. The world doesn't need another Joe Bonamassa record right away. So we got the Hollywood Bowl. We had Blues Deluxe last year. We'll put out some singles this year or maybe next year, and then we'll just see. I mean, I don't know how many albums I have left. I mean, it's like how many. I'm not even sure if the album format is going to be relevant in 10 years. It's like who's making CDs? Who has a CD player? There's not. I mean, like I'm on a tour bus, a music tour bus. There's no CD player in here, and it's like I don't have one on my computer. I don't have one out here. You don't even have them in the new cars. So the concept of a 12-song 59-minute record, I'm seeing it become less and less relevant, so I think we're back to, A and B sides, singles, because even the general notion when you're dealing with a streaming kind of business, you're releasing 10 of the 11 songs anyway before the album comes out to keep the algorithm or whatever Spotify thing is. And so you're basically just turning out singles, and then the 12th song or the 11th song is that was a full length album. But like, who cares at that point? They've heard most of it. And you're going to dump the junk at the end, and you're going to put the good songs first. I mean, that's just how it's going to work, So I don't know. I don't know in the next one.
Well, I know you have recently released Better the Devil You Know, which is to mark the 10th anniversary of your Different Shades of Blue album.
Yeah.
This was a song you co-wrote with Jonathan Cain of Journey.
Mm-hmm.
I have to ask, it's such a wonderful song,
Hey.
and I hope this doesn't come across as flip, but how did this song not make the original cut of the album?
I don't remember. I truly don't remember the thought process. I think it may have been just redundancy of groove. We got one that sounds like that or one that's in the same kind of, whatever. Every record has extra tracks, and sometimes you regret not putting them on there, and sometimes you carry them over. And I think that's been our, there's never a record that doesn't have an extra track or two. There's some I want deleted, but yeah.
Well, along with recording and touring, you recently launched Journeyman LLC alongside of your longtime manager, Roy Weissman, which is a one-stop shop with the goal of building awareness for independent artists worldwide. Can you talk about stepping out of the role as the musician and performer and kind of going into this role as kind of bringing up and fostering new up-and-coming talent?
Well, we've always done that. Journeyman is basically my career applied to somebody else. The vertical integration of it all. You do your own merch, you do your own records, you do your own touring, you do your own marketing. And, we're doing that with Robert John and the Wreck, and we're doing it with Joanne Shaw Taylor. And it's been working out, things are happening for them. And Joanne feels like she has the wind in her back, for the first time. And that's a great feeling because she's really a super talented artist. And same thing with Robert John and the Wreck, that you put some marketing money into this thing and hopefully, they get it to the point where they can start popping good numbers on the road and self-sustaining, pay for it all, and then, make a profit and build a career and a business. It's really a business building event, not as much as a situation where you can, you can't apply it to everyone, but it does apply to more artists than you think.
Because recently I did an episode with female blues guitarist Jax Hollow on modern blues artists, and there are so many out there that are making a name for themselves. There is a blues scene out there that continues to thrive, and I'd like to know, do you have your eyes on other artists to maybe bring on to Journeyman moving forward?
We're concentrating on two, because when I came up, we had our entire mechanism was concentrated on one artist. And it was me. And it really does take a lot of people to do that, And, our office is 22 people, and we're bringing on more people to run these things. And it just becomes we want to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. So less is more.
Well, Joe, this has been an absolute honor. Been a fan for so long. I love what you're doing out there. Thank you for keeping the blues alive. And thank you so much for joining me on my weekly mixtape.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for doing this.
And for those of you listening, I've created the ultimate Joe Bonamassa playlist, at least in my humble opinion, that you could listen to over at myweeklymixtape.com. And remember, you can also find My Weekly Mixtape on all the social media haunts at My Weekly Mixtape. You can also head to myweeklymixtape.com to check out the full catalog of My Weekly Mixtape episodes. And if you like what you're hearing on the show, you can help me out by either telling a friend, leaving the show a 5-star review wherever you're tuning in, or becoming a Patreon mixtaper at patreon.com/My Weekly Mixtape. That's all for this week. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, enjoy the tunes.
The Jeremiah Show is proudly featured on Pantheon Podcasts. Don't miss an exciting episode of The Jeremiah Show. You're invited to the world of pop culture, music icons, and food gods. Find Jeremiah at thejeremiahshow.com or on all social networks and back catalogs at Linktree, Jeremiah D. Higgins.
I am Miles Zuniga from Fastball.
And we are Girl Named Tom.
Hi, I'm Marielle Hemingway.
Hi, this is Chef Melissa King from Top Chef All Stars.
Hi there, everybody. This is Ann H.
Hi, I'm Shadow Stevens. I'm having a great time on The Jeremiah Show, the greatest show in the history of the world.
The Jeremiah Show is brought to you by Evolve Entertainment Network, Pantheon Podcasts, and Radio Candy Media.
I do hope you enjoyed that interview. I'm sorry that Jeremiah is so hopeless. I did made a real effort to sort of get through the sludge and the drudgery and the cliches and the second-rate ideas. I hope I didn't disappoint you too much. And as far as Jeremiah is concerned, do write in, because if you do, we can do something about this.